Those documents are categorized in numbered subfolders that correspond directly with the agenda. So it should be easy to follow. So even those in person, if you want to follow what you saw online, it's the same numbers, same order that we're going in order of. Today we'll conduct our public budget hearing before considering the land budget for approval and other action that we have. But before we get there, as always, let's start with public comment. The point is a public project, and as a board, we have a strong responsibility and feel seriously about the importance of ensuring that the project reflects public values and that provides broad public benefits. And so we value input from any member of the public that wants to come and share their comments following the procedures that are outlined on the agenda. So let me see, is there anyone in the room that would like to speak to public comment? If you would just raise your hand. Not seeing anyone in the room. What about online? If you're online, if you could raise your virtual hand there, we'll see you. I don't see anyone online either. Well, we'll move on then to the third item on our agenda, which is approval of the minutes from the February board meeting. The board packet that came out included those minutes from not the February board meeting, but our May 14th, 2025 board meeting. Hopefully everyone's had the chance to review those minutes. I'll go ahead and open up any comments or discussion to the minutes. Seeing none, if we can get a motion to approve the minutes, Senator Stevenson. Oh, excuse me. Is your light on? Can't tell. The green light, is it on? Okay, there we go. Go ahead and make that motion again.
Yeah. The light is on. Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes as presented.
All right, so we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Do a second. Second from Chair Snow. Any discussion to approval of those minutes? Seeing none, I'll place the motion. All those in favor of approving the minutes from May 14, 2025, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Rule that passes unanimously. We'll move to the fourth item on our agenda, which is the fiscal year 2026 public budget hearing. We recognize the great trust that's been placed by the public in the authority to ensure that our funds are appropriate and spent in a manner consistent with the approved budget. We also greatly appreciate the work of our good finance committee, including April Cooper and Michael Ambre, and they have reviewed this fiscal year 2026 budget for our consideration. We actually reviewed this on our last board meeting and had a chance to ask some questions and take some time to really dig into this before it being presented for approval today. So let me start by recognizing Don Willey, who's our Director of Operations, to share the fiscal 26 financials, and then we'll have some comments from our Finance Committee and members of the board, and also we'll facilitate some public comment, if any. Go ahead, Don.
Thank you. It's a little bit bigger. You see that? Okay. Still small.
Oh, that's pretty small. There we go.
Is that better? Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to review this. As you mentioned, we looked through this initially in our last board meeting. We'd like to,
Don, if you'll just swallow that mic.
We'd like to make sure you have plenty of time to look over the budget and ensure you're comfortable with how this has been allocated. We do just have one larger change within what we reviewed last time versus today. And I'll just review that first, and then I'll go through the rest here. That larger adjustment from, I can scroll down to it. Sorry, it's flipping over. Okay, so just right here on this capital expenditure. So we anticipate in the board approved budget amendment in our last meeting to take care of two capital expenditures that we were anticipating. One was the outfall pipe, and the other was the land acquisition adjacent to Puerto Rocco Boulevard. The land acquisition has gone through, that payment has been made and will be reflected in our June financial report. But the the outfall pipe expense will not occur in FY25. So we carried that, we just made that modification, moving that expense to the FY26 budget. And so you'll see that reflected here now in the FY26 budget as opposed to the FY25 budget. That's the only change that occurred. Let me just go through this briefly so I can answer any questions. First, with our staffing, we've increased that budget to accommodate a 3/4 time administrative assistant. That position was posted, is closed. We're reviewing applications now and anticipate having an individual on board in the next 30 to 45 days, most likely. This also accommodates cost of living increase that's consistent with what was approved by the legislature. We have kept consistent our travel in out of state. We've moderately increased our in-state travel just to accommodate primarily board travel in this budget line. And any travel that would make sense for us to be a part of events across the state, maybe the One Utah Summit, those kind of events where it makes sense for the point to be involved. We've increased the mobile devices again to accommodate the new staff member, ensuring that we have the budget for mobile devices for them. Kept consistent our advertising and legal publications. We were well under budget for that so far this year, so we feel okay with this being consistent moving forward. A lot of those costs really now move on to TPP as they are marketing the site. We'll still be engaged, of course, but a lot of that responsibility and cost now moves to TPP. We moderately increased our other contractual services. You can see the breakdown over on the right side here. This accommodates a website. This was actually budgeted in the prior fiscal year. We did not move forward with that. We are preparing to move forward with that though in this year. So we moved that from the tech expenses now up to other contractual services. So it still recognizes a total net decrease in the overall budget for those services, but an increase in the specific budget line. Moving down to professional technical services, we are we're decreasing this budget line as we've been able to look at our needs and recognize our budget over the last few years and our actual expenditures. We've come in well under budget here. We feel confident that we can reduce this budget and still be comfortable with this amount of $1,040,000. We've also reduced our attorney fees. We have incredible attorneys who have worked diligently to support the point, but have also done it efficiently as well. So we've gone ahead and reduced this, and that again just frees up some additional budget moving forward and brings it in line with what we expect the expenses to be. As we talked about a few months ago, the board approved an increase in, or we created a new line item in 6193 utilities water. This covers our bill to the Jordan Valley Water District. We also added the East Jordan irrigation, and then we've added some buffer room in this budget line as additional potential invoices come for any utilities associated with the site as we start vertical construction in the next fiscal year. So this, we amended the budget. This is now reflected in our budget moving forward. So just an increase from the 270 to 335 that accommodates all of the invoices that we're currently aware of and have encumbered for FY26. We've reduced our insurance. We've never breached that 10,000 limit, so we've reduced it down to be more realistic with our historical expenses. And then we've added just in this reception of meeting costs, the partnering meetings, business lunches, board retreat, and recognition, ensuring that we have the budget to have proper collaboration, not just as board members, but also with TPP as our partners. We're moving into a very fast moving phase of the project. And so we feel it's important to make sure that we have budget associated with partnering opportunities between POMSA and TPP, and then potentially other sub-campuses as they're reviewed and considered by the board. We've reduced our membership dues. We took a hard look at this to make sure that we're involved in the community, but also ensuring that the budget is spent appropriately. We felt that there's opportunities here to still get the bang for the buck and be involved, but also make sure that there is a significant ROI to the point. So this budget reflects that consideration of ROI. Slight increase in the convention seminars, workshops. We've had success in some of the trade shows that we've been able to participate in so far this year. We were at Select USA in Washington, DC, and then ICSC in Las Vegas. Nick will be headed to Bio International in Boston, which is one of the target industries for recruitment for the point. So he'll be there along with folks from Convergence Hall, the Utah Innovation Fund, and several of our partners. So our presence at those are proving to be positive conversations. So we're increasing this slightly for maybe potential opportunities as we look forward to FY26 and those types of trade shows that it makes sense for the point to be involved in. We've kept consistent our contingency for the year. As we look at the total overall items to this point, we have a net increase of 187,000. So for that total, that grouping of 3,185,800 for that. As we move down into technology expenses, we've been able to reduce these. Again, the large share of this is moving that website from this section up to the contractual services. Still assuming that cost, but we see a budget total overall decrease to 15.5 in this budget line. And then lastly, as I talked about, the capital expenditures, and then we have that GoYo public art grant that was used to fund our work with Designing Local. We would anticipate over the next year engaging in either an art competition or moving forward in some sort of a capacity that would begin the public art program at the point as we see the first several buildings, vertical construction beginning with those first several buildings. So that brings our total to 8,618,300 for FY26. That would be the proposed budget for next year.
Thank you for that great presentation. Let me turn some time over to the Finance Committee. April or Michael, do you have thoughts you'd like to share? Could you press your button so I know which one's yours, April? Thank you. Go ahead, April.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks to Don and Mike. We have gone through the financials. I wanted to point out to you guys at the top on the revenues, every year up until now, we've had just everything combined in there. But now that we're actually starting to have lease revenue, we broke it out so you can see the lease revenue coming from the land ongoing, which is new appropriation, and then how much we've carried forward. So it's not just all blended together, and you can all see where the different funds are coming from. Other than that, the Finance Committee, we've gone through all the other line items and done a thorough review. Thanks to Don for putting this presentation together, and I think we'll approve all the line items. It's a good budget and forecast going forward.
Thank you. Michael, anything to add?
No, I don't.
I don't know which
There you
one's
go. I don't have anything to add. I appreciate April's help, and I know how much work Don's put in. That was a great comment about the incoming revenue sources. So because there will be, moving forward, we'll identify those sources. So thank you.
Great. All right. Well, this is a chance before we go back to board action for any member of the public to provide additional comment as part of this open public budget hearing. So is there any member of the public in person that would like to speak towards the budget? If you would raise your hand. I don't see anyone in the room. Let's go online. Is there anyone online? If you could raise your virtual hand. Just check here. Don't see anyone there. So we'll go ahead and close the public comment, come back to the board discussion for discussion of the budget or approval of the 2026 budget. Chair Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make just a brief comment and then a motion, if that's okay.
Please.
Reserve motion. I just want to express my thanks to Don and Mike and all of the staff, but particularly those two for keeping an eye on finance. It's a really close eye on what our expenditures are and also beginning to project revenues. That's great news. Also, April, for your work on that committee as well, especially given your background. So with that, I would make a motion that this board approve the 4-year 2026 budget as it has been presented to us by Dawn. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Great. Second by Mayor Wilson. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing no discussion, I'll place the motion. All those in favor of approving the fiscal year 2026 budget, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, I'll rule that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll move to the 5th item on our agenda and back to Don to review our May financials with the board. Go ahead, Don.
Thank you. This will be quite a bit quicker. If you look on the top right corner, we're at the end of May. We should be with 8% of our budget remaining. And as you look through the far right column, there's only one line where we are below the 8%, and that's because we fully expended that one invoice. So we are looking very healthy across the board. We will have some true up that will happen with our fiscal year ending. We do have several invoices that come at the end of the fiscal year, and so we'll be reconciling those. And so our next budget report, you'll see some of those budget lines getting closer to that 8%. The one area, as you can see, our total operating expenses at 84%. The reason why that is so high is because the board amended the budget to include that $5,087,000 under budget line 6816. That moves to FY26. So I just made a note there. So our shows that we have a lot of budget left. We do, obviously, but it's because we retain that. We don't need to make any adjustments to that since it's budgeted for, but just not being used. And has now been approved in the FY26 budget. But aside from that, we are on track, and we'll look forward to our final FY25 budget report in our next meeting.
Great. Thanks for that report. Michael, April, anything you have to add? All right. Go to the board. Any discussion, questions for Don? Or we could also take a motion to approve the May 2025 financials.
A motion to approve the presented financials for May.
Okay, thank you for that motion. Is there a second? Second from Mayor Walker. All right, any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll place it. All those in favor of approving the May 2025 financials, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Rule that passes unanimously. We'll move on to the 6th item on our agenda, which is the director's report. And we're lucky to have our good executive director, Michael Ambray, here, who can give us an update on the progress of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll start with the backbone on-site infrastructure. We continue progress on stormwater, culinary, and all the roads. The water tank and transmission lines will bid later this month. After we gather those bids and understand our overall budget, then we'll begin to understand the level of program that we can implement for River to Range, unless additional funds can be procured. PID 1 in the entertainment venue. I'm very proud to announce that we have come to final versions of the pledge agreement, the DDA for the entertainment venue, and the ground lease. I just wanted to mention and thank everybody for their hard work on this. It took hours upon hours to get to this point, and now time is of the essence. July 9th, as you may know, Trump tariffs go into effect, and that's going to create some unstable markets, especially in the bond. So if we could approve these and get these, get the bonds issued tomorrow and beat the tariffs, that would be wonderful. Draper's interlocal agreement. We've come a long way. We're in the final edits, and I appreciate Troy and his staff. Again, this has taken a lot of time to kind of work out all the details, but we've made great progress. I just wanted to report back that we also have closed on the right-of-way acquisition. So that's great. And we've also entered into an agreement with Bluffdale for the stormwater outfall pipe. If you recall, in the last board meeting, there was a bit of a slip up with documentation not being presented to the board in a timely manner. I just wanted to report back that we've taken a look at our policy and we've revised our policy to get action items, documentation to the board 5 business days prior to the board meeting, unless otherwise approved by the co-chairs. So next steps. So we've got a lot of accomplished. And so this is kind of just what we're focused on next, right? We're studying a for sale product of about a 50-acre parcel that would be for mixed residential. We're studying that. And we're also looking at options for, what types of uses exactly are we talking about? Are we talking condos, stacked flats, row houses? So we're looking into that would benefit our project. Also, we're estimating the backbone infrastructure for that to see what makes sense, if it makes sense to sell it to developers that would install the backbone infrastructure, or what does it do for us if we install it and then sell the property? So I'll report back probably in August with that study. We are also studying various cost levies for various amenities. There's a transit district, there's a master association with landscaping, there's smart city technologies. So we're kind of going through an effort of identifying what each of these costs would entail and will the market bear it? And so I'll, when we get closer to really understanding that, I'll report back that as well. The next steps again are negotiating water rights and transfer with Jordan Valley Water and Draper City. There's a meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Continuing talks with Salt Lake County on an interlocal agreement. And then we are reviewing applicants, as Don mentioned, for an admin assistant. And I just wanted to note we had 187 applicants. And that's it.
Great report. Let's go to the members of the committee for any questions or comments. Start with Chair Snow.
Thank you. Just a request, Mike, when we revisit the for sale piece in August, I think it'd be helpful if you could bring to the board or give us a schematic showing where that 50-acre parcel lies with respect to phase 1. And so we get some idea of what that's going to look like, at least in terms of area and where it's located.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Mayor Walker, could you press the buttons?
But as we look to the sale, we're talking ownership sale. We're not talking rental.
That's correct.
This focus will be on ownership, going the whole 50 acres. We're not, it's an ownership parcel. Is that?
That is the intent. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Any additional comments, questions? Yeah, Senator.
So as we look at sale on some of this property, does the parcel we're looking at selling, does it have any implication or any ties to the infrastructure we're putting in with phase 1?
Yes, our stormwater and sewer are already installed because they're main trunk lines. So we would have to put in water and roads.
Okay. And then I guess we have an agreement, or the city would have an agreement. Someone needs to have an agreement to make sure we collect back any of those fees that the developer is responsible for.
Yeah, that's all contemplated in the interlocal agreement between Draper and Palmslow. Yes.
Thank you, Senator. Any additional comments or questions? Mayor Ramsey.
Thank you. I hope it's not too loud in my background. I'll make this brief. I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate the amendment to the policy just to help get some materials to the board members further in advance, a few days out. That is super helpful. And I just want to say thank you to Michael and his team for that.
You're welcome.
All right, not seeing any other comments. I'll just add my great gratitude to Michael and your staff. We're seeing tremendous progress. I know this hasn't been easy. I know you've been working through very difficult issues, but just really appreciate the good work that's been done, and we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, we'll move on to the 7th item on our agenda. And this is in our last board meeting, the board considered several amendments to the PID governing documents. The board passed a resolution that gave the co-chairs and Director Ambre authority to review and execute the entertainment venue DDA, the entertainment venue ground lease, and the capital pledge agreement that we're going to be considering later in this meeting. But prior to addressing these items with the board, I'd like to introduce a resolution that provides an additional amendment to the PID governing documents. And we made some changes last time to the PID governing documents to be able to pull in this event venue space. But we weren't ready for this change, proposed amendment that's in there. And this in your packet here, I think is the top of the stack. And to start, let me just go ahead and read the language in the resolve section from the resolution, so it's clear what we're talking about here. This resolution would amend the PID governing document to grant Palmsla Board the ability to remove a member of the PID board with or without cause. And I will note that the required public notice was given for consideration of this action. So in the resolution, let me just read the resolve section. It says, now therefore be it resolved by the board as follows: the terms defined in the foregoing recital shall at the same meeting when used herein, and all action heretofore taken not inconsistent with provisions of this resolution by the board directed toward the amendments contemplated herein are hereby ratified, approved, and confirmed. 2, the governing document is hereby amended as provided in exhibit B hereto. 3, a trustee appointed by the Public Infrastructure Board District Board shall serve at the pleasure of the board and may be removed and replaced at any time with or without cause by the board. 4, if any section, paragraph, clause, or provision of this resolution shall for any reason be held to be invalid or unenforceable, the invalidity or unenforceability of such section, paragraph, clause, or provision shall not affect any of the remaining provisions of this resolution. 5, all acts, orders, and resolutions and parts thereof in conflict with this resolution be and the same are hereby rescinded. 6, prior to recordation of a certificate of annexation for the districts, Palmsla does hereby authorize the board to make any corrections, deletions, additions to the governing document or any other document herein authorized or approved, including but not limited to corrections to the property restrictions herein contained, which may be necessary to conform to the same, to the intent hereof, to correct errors or omissions therein, to complete the same, to remove ambiguities therefrom, or to conform the same or other provisions of said instruments to the provisions of this resolution or any resolution adopted by this board or provisions of the laws of the state of Utah or the United States. 7, this resolution shall take effect immediately. And then the exhibit B is fairly simple. If you'll see that, it's just the addition of a section, or it's really the addition of a section D that says removal. A trustee of the board serves at the pleasure of Palmsla and may be removed and replaced at any time with or without cause. And I'll note that that language mirrors the exact same language for the appointees to this board, other than the 2 appointees that are named specifically being the mayor of Draper and the mayor of Salt Lake County. But everyone else at this board serves in the exact same language at the pleasure of the appointing member and may be removed and replaced at any time with or without cause. To give just a little bit of background for the reasoning behind this, and I do apologize to the board that we didn't take this up last year when initially approving the PID board, because I think that would have been a better time to be able to get this in place. And I know that the PID board has been operating for the last year quite efficiently and effectively. Currently, the way the board's makeup is made up is there are 4 members or 4 trustees of the board that have been appointed, all of them from the Point Partners team. And then we have 1 trustee that was appointed by Palmsla that we actually effectuated in the last board meeting, which is our good executive director. In a typical board, it would make sense for a PID board to have a majority led from the developers without really any oversight from any other governing board, municipality or government. However, in this case, because the land is owned by the state, because the majority of the money that is coming back to pay for the bonds that are going to be solicited by the PID board are coming from public funds, it makes sense to have more guardrails in place to protect those assets and ensure that the authority has more control over the direction that the PID board is going. And that's what we're trying to do in a very light way, allow for Palmsla to be able to take control if needed of what the PID board is and make any changes in the PID board if possible. And I'll say, I don't think there's any contemplation of that happening at any point in the near future, in the long future. I believe we have a strong partnership with TPP, and I appreciate the great work that they've done. However, in the future, if for any reason we become out of alignment, it would make sense for, because of the great amount of public dollars and resources that are being appropriated by this PID board, for this authority to have a little bit more control. And that's what this resolution is intending to do here. So I will add, just in closing here, that I have filed a bill file to look at this issue more broadly, to just see if in any of these cases where a PID board is created by an authority, and note that this authority and the PID boards themselves are both political subdivisions of the state, that this similar language should be in place and allow the authority to have this. But that being said, I think it is incumbent upon us, before approving these documents where we're pledging a large amount of public funds, for us to pass this resolution. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion and questions from the committee and any action that they'd like to take. April, go ahead.
So what we approved before in section A was the board will be composed of 5 trustees who shall be initially appointed by POMSLA. So you're just requesting in D that if there's ever a reason to remove, that's also done by POMSLA, the initial appointment, and if there's any removal or replacement.
Exactly. Yeah. So the trustees serve, or the board members serve terms, either 4 or 6-year terms. And then, there's a process for them to get replaced by looking at the leaseholders and the percentage of ownership the leaseholders have to appoint new board members or re-elect the board members that were there. But if for any reason those board members are not acting in the best interest from POMS's perspective, then POMSA would be able to come in and make that removal.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead. Chair Snow.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I'd like to do, I'd like to make a comment, but I think it's appropriate, and maybe I'm the only one interested, but I want to hear from our partners, development partners, if this change is affected. I would like to know what you anticipate its effect would be in terms of moving the project forward or slowing it down. If you can comment on that, that's one of my primary interests, is getting this project off the ground. We've been working on this issue for several months now. And by the way, to my co-chair, I think it's worth mentioning that what you're proposing now is a compromise from where you were before. And I think that's worth mentioning too. And I appreciate that. But if it's okay with the co-chair, could we invite the developers, our partners, to comment on this change and how it might affect their process?
Yeah, be happy to. If there's a member of TPP who'd like, Robert, you want to come forward? If you just introduce yourself.
Sure. Oh,
It
is it
is.
on?
Yeah, you
Hello?
just have to pull it
Can you
super
hear me?
close.
Is that coming through? Okay. Robert Booth, member of the Point Partners Development Team. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to express my opinion. Will this have an effect? I would say undoubtedly. We spent some time talking through some of these issues collectively in the past, and I think the position from TPP has not changed in terms of the effect. The argument seems to be a principle-based argument, and it's a theory-based argument, but respectively, there hasn't been one credible kind of hypothetical scenario that anyone can come up with that we haven't been able to immediately talk through how we're protected against. And so the upside of what I see here is a principle-based argument that in some world of possibility where there's a misalignment, this would be able to be covered. But the downside is real time and real money to the project. And so I look at, from a public benefit perspective, what is best for the public? And to me, it is moving this project forward and doing so in an efficient manner. As we push things back, that's real ground lease dollars that are not being collected. That's sales tax dollars that are not being collected or generated. And then there's a component of this has been a discussion item for some time, and that it's been a tough one for TPP because it frankly has been there's an element from our perspective, and I'm speaking openly here in public, but there's a trust issue that feels like it has been put pretty squarely in front of us. And so those are some of our comments. As you know, this action has to be approved at the PID board level as well. And as one of those board members, I can't speak for the others, but I feel that it would be unlikely that the PID board would also approve a similar action. If the one last point relating to time and money, if these agreements are not signed, Mike mentioned the Trump tariffs. We've been pushing extremely hard as the collective team, all been working on this, trying to hit certain deadlines to make it happen before those tariffs expire, because there's uncertainty. And effectively what it means is we potentially have a higher interest rate, which means we get less bonds. So we have a kind of a temporary period of stability in the market. And we have planned to at least go out to market, assuming things would go well this week in this board meeting, to go out tomorrow, actually. That's where all the documents are kind of pushing out to go to market. And if we delay, this isn't I'm not trying to threat. This is just, if we delay, the reality is that we push, we probably bleed into the 4th of July weekend, so we can't issue. And then we go past July 9th and we get into the uncertainty, which causes dollars. And is the board team, including Director Ombre, have reviewed that PID budget in terms of where we're putting dollars and trying to spend those dollars for the public benefit. It's a tight budget, between venue, roads, parking, and those sorts of things. And so we're trying to squeeze everything we can out. So those are my thoughts and opinions. Happy to, express more if needed.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I think most of the board understand this, but perhaps they don't. But as I understand it, if this passes, the issue goes to the current PID board to see whether the PID board approves it. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what if the PID board doesn't approve it? Where are you all at that point?
We sit where we sit today, I believe. I mean, I would leave that, but there's been a motion passed by POMSLA, but because it's an agreement essentially between two parties, then there has to be, two parties that agree to a change. And so it would just be a proposal that, didn't pass, as my understanding.
All right. I'd like to make a comment, but I'm going to reserve it until.
Could I
Okay.
ask
Yeah,
a
go ahead, Mayor
clarifying
Wilson.
question based on the statement? Thank you. So why? I mean, I can understand if we weren't to sign an agreement, that's absolutely clear there would be a delay. If we're stuck on a major, but the idea of a future removal of a board member, which is from where I sit, a very unlikely occurrence, why does that create the delay and concern that would lead to, hey, we're not going to miss we're going to miss the window of the
Yeah,
current terms, the Trump tariffs coming.
Well,
Like, what is the
yeah.
specific reason for everyone to be spooked by this?
We need these three agreements that are, I think, on the agenda. So specifically the subcampus DDA, the subcampus ground lease that is part of that. And then this pledge agreement that would pledge, the revenues to the bonds. We can't go out to the market until those are executed.
No, I understand
Oh,
that,
sorry.
but why does what the
Oh, why does the
representative?
resolution?
Yeah, why would this amendment slow you down?
So it's an unknown. So right now, the TPP has a majority of the PID board. And the difference, frankly, between what Representative Tusher has expressed is the same language as this board, but respectively, this board is not putting their personal dollars of private capital into the development. It's the developer who's putting its personal dollars or private capital into the development on behalf of the public entity, not for itself, for the public. And so because TPP is on the PID board, the PID cannot contractually obligate itself to spend dollars unless there are dollars in place, which means pre-development dollars before bonds get spent, the PID can't contract for those dollars. So either the developer has to pay for them or the state or some other entity has to pay for them because the PID can't contract for those dollars. So if the developer is going to pay for them, then the developer wants a certainty that those dollars are going to be reimbursed. And if you introduce the chance that the developer doesn't get reimbursed, then that's the problem. That the developer is not incentivized to then go spend the dollars privately on behalf of public because the PID board has to vote to get them approved because again, PID can't contract for them. So we already have an agreement with the PID that says, hey, we're going to spend these dollars, but you're going to vote. And when that vote happens, we generally know how we're going to vote to reimburse those dollars. Now we're doing everything through, the proper channels, procurement, all those sorts of things, but we generally know. So if you say that, hey, we want to remove those PID board members and we will now, there's a chance that we won't reimburse you. There's not an incentive for a developer to want to go spend those private dollars.
Mayor Walker.
I got three questions right now. First one, so when you're talking about the market, when you said the Trump tariffs, you mean specifically the market uncertainty and with its effect on interest rates?
That's correct, relating to this specific bond issuance
And
timing.
right now, we've got you have an interest rate do you think you've locked down?
We have, working with Piper Sandler, our bond underwriter, they're in frequent communication with bonds and there's bond transactions happening. So they have a general feel, just like you would get an appraisal on a house. You have a general feel from where the transaction would go. It just introduces a bunch of uncertainty when the market changes. And we may want to delay because if, hypothetically, if we're going to lose $10 million off a bond, we might want to wait to see if we can have the market recover to get those $10 million. Because once you issue, the dollars you have are set. There's no ability to go back and get more dollars.
And so what you're saying is you're going to go out and get the bonds and you're not going to start the construction of the infrastructure for the event center until you have a bond issue. So the delay is going to occur because of the market uncertainty. If you don't strike now, it might get worse. It could get better. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm no
And
predictor of the Trump economy, but okay, so that's your big market uncertainty. Is it maybe if this resolution, well, so if this delays it, it's delayed because we don't get the rates you need to get more money for more infrastructure.
that's correct. And the infrastructure for the event venue and the infrastructure for the promenade in phase one, because it's all one issuance, and I think we've been through this before, it has to be one issuance because it's the most effective use of the dollars money to get the most money. They're tied. So if we delay this component, we also delay the components inside phase one of moving forward.
Are you saying you may strike a bond deal in the next few weeks?
We would go out to the market this week and then like tomorrow or or Friday, if we get these agreements executed.
If you don't go out this week, it might be past July.
Correct.
And then go back to, so the way that the PID is set up now, and you, all you developers are the PID board, with the exception of Mike. What you're saying is you've spent money developing the plans, the concept for how you'll spend the infrastructure money, right? You've already invested your private capital. And what you're saying is that, what's that?
Oh, yes. Yes, we have expended significant dollars.
And the reason that you said, at least I want to understand it, the reason you said you expended that capital without an agreement in place yet, without money in place to pay you back, is because you're on the PID board who's going to vote to pay you back.
That's exactly right.
So the security that you have by being in control of the PID board gave you the comfort to spend your money.
That's correct.
And then what you're saying is if you don't have the complete security as the PID board, going forward, you may not spend your money because you may be leery of not having the PID board. I mean, you'd still have your PID board, but the PID board would still make its agreement to reimburse you. But what you're saying is if we replace a PID board member because we're unhappy with it, that might give you enough uncertainty that you.
Or all
wouldn't?
PID board members
Okay.
simultaneously.
And you're saying that that gives you, as a developer, enough uncertainty, that fact, that potential that you won't invest in the future your own money.
We have discussed this issue ad nauseum as a developer. And I'm not, I'm one of three firms represented, but amongst the three firms, we have discussed this issue as being a material issue for the developer.
And then if we go, let's say this resolution passed in some form, then it would go to your PID board, and you've represented, you don't think your PID board, you're only one vote out, there's four others. They would not vote to accept the ability to have it be removed.
I believe it unlikely.
Okay, and then where do we go from there?
I would let the attorneys in the room or others, I think the motion just dies, and then it's just one of many motions and many actions. So it could be another motion, could be further discussion. But as it relates to that specific motion and resolution, I think it just dies.
And then would you move forward with what you're doing?
Well, that depends on if these agreements get approved, absolutely. If they don't, we can't.
So if the resolution passed in some form, we signed all the agreements, and your PID board said, no, we don't accept that resolution, are you still going to move forward?
Yes, because that's where we sit today. That would be the same equivalent as POMSA never having made the motion and just approving the agreements.
And then Representative Fisher's talked about a bill file that might change the law. I guess that would take a session unless there was an interim session of some sort. But what does that sitting out there, does that give you more pause to not want to do more? Or I just explained it to me. I'm just
No,
trying to figure it out.
Whoops. I understand that that's the process that can happen, and we would welcome the opportunity to, participate in that process and be supportive of it if it were beneficial to the project. I think we would express some of the same concerns we've expressed, which would not be singular to this project. It would be, other developers would feel similarly in similar situations. But we completely understand that that's the process and
explain to me the hook. The hook we have right now as a board to stop you from, I don't know what the example is that Representative Tusher's worried about. He might have to give us one, but let's just say, what do you think the hook we have on you right now is and why we don't need this?
There's state law first, which allows for what PIDs can and can't do. It's a box. Second, independent from that, you have the POMSA legislation. And POMSA's box is a little bit smaller than the PID box. Independent from that, you have our development agreement, which development agreement rights are assigned to the PID board. And so that development agreement rights are smaller than you know, the collective two other rights, and they all govern these things inside the pledge agreement, inside the subcampus DDA, and inside the ground lease agreement. They all deal with these topics. And so not only that, but when we go do work, we have to submit it to POMSLA for approval, to review and take down land and take down non-leasehold takedown lands. So for roads. So POMSLA is in it on both sides already. So that's why I was saying the upside of what is gained by this, for the life of me, I can't figure out what it is other than a hypothetical argument. But the downside, I think, is real, which is why we're opposed to it.
April.
That's the only question I have. I might have some more.
So we're partners, the state and the developers. The state's also put in an enormous amount of money. I know, I think it's fair to you to say you've been putting in money, but the state's carrying all the underlying costs of the land. And the state's already agreed in here to take 1/2 of the sales and use tax revenue and pledge it to pay back those district obligations. So we're taking a lot, millions and millions and millions of public dollars. And so the state and the developers should remain partners. And the developers right now have 4 spots on the board. And then we've placed Mike Ambert, the director of the point, on the board. So the state actually has less position than you guys, but probably just as much capital between the underlying land cost. I think it would be different if a developer owned the land and they were doing a public infrastructure district to run the whole thing and the state's not involved at all. But ultimately, the state has the underlying land and we're pledging a lot of tax dollars. So if this resolution was approved, you're saying you guys would be the ones to delay it. If the board approved it today, then you guys aren't going to approve it. So the delay doesn't come from the board. The delay comes from the current PID board wouldn't agree to it. And then you guys would cause the delay. Because if you agreed also, we just move forward and issue bonds and go forward. And we're both partners in the whole thing. Correct or
Can
not
I
correct?
Respond? Or-
Is that a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think the example is the baseline example is not the same. The state owns the land and all of the improvements are inuring to the benefit of the state, not to the developer. So it's completely different. If we own the land, the benefit would inure to the developer. But all of the improvements that we're talking about, the PID approving, are for the benefit of the state and the public, not for the developer. But the private dollars are the ones funding it. So if that's how it is, then the state should just go fund the infrastructure and the state and POMSLA should issue the bonds, which we've offered numerous times. You guys should issue the bonds and take the risk and the liability. And so if you're asking for private dollars, which is essentially the agreement, that's the difference. Because we're spending on the state's land to benefit the state.
But to be clear, Robert, let me just clarify. The liabilities that are being taken on are by the PID board. They're not by the developers. The developer doesn't have to pay back the bonds. The developers are going to be reimbursed for any upfront costs by the PID board.
If the PID board elects.
If the PID board elects, but certainly there's a reliability argument that you guys have taken on that would be, even if the board was replaced, that if the PID board were not to reimburse those funds, there would be a claim against the PID board by the developers.
That's not how our agreement reads.
Well, that certainly would be the case. Anyway, I think it's just important to clarify that the PID board is the one that is owning these assets. They're the ones who have to pay back the liability, and a PID board is a political subdivision of the state.
Yes, when you say owning these assets, many of the assets will be dedicated away. The PID will be funding them. They won't own the fee simple title to the roads and those sorts of things, Draper. Specifically relating to the event venue, yes.
Senator.
I have a minute. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes here. I've got 3 or 4 points. I spent a lot of time on this yesterday. I've talked to many of you in the room about where this is at. And I have kind of had the opportunity to work with these land use authorities right from the very beginning on, I sat on the board of 3 of them, the MITA board, the inland board, and the organization we're working with right now. So as a result, I counted up, I think I've ran in excess of 25 pieces of legislation that I have sponsored to make sure these land use authorities work. That's the big picture here. That as I start looking at that and dividing it down, first of all, we've gone through a process to select a developer. And we did the same thing with MITA when we have a primary developer of which we've developed full faith in as we go through this process. That we've asked that developer to make a tremendous investment in this property. And of course, the PID board is part of that, and how that's paid back is part of it. But this affects, when we look at what this does for the state of Utah, it's far beyond building that development down there. We're talking about jobs and capital going to education and all kinds of things as we develop this out. But right now, I think that we've got a developer that at least I'm at a very high trust level with, and there's several reasons for that. First of all, if they develop phase 1, which we're talking about right now, they're going to want the rest of these phases. They would like to be the primary on all of the phases of the development. So they have the utmost incentive to get this right. And the PID process is only part of that. But I believe that we're aimed in a really good direction with what we're doing here right now, as is. The other part of this is that if it looks like we need legislation in the future on this, as I said, I've ran 25 bills on this. I've never lost one. We have never lost a bill associated with the land use authority. And I think we've got an amazing process that we can go through, and we can change the legislation if we don't like the way this is working. That's a tremendous incentive for this PID board to get it right. I think that because of their personal ownership in this and their personal investment, they have every opportunity to get this right and every incentive to get it right. I believe that as of right now, I think we should move forward with the process that we're working on, that we have in place, and not interfere with it. In fact, the good representative here with me, him and I have been friends for a long time, and we ran a lot of legislation together. And it's worked. And I just think that we're in a position, though, that we probably need to move forward with this as is, look at it. If it looks like it needs changes, we've got every opportunity to do that in the future. But let's not throw a monkey wrench into this now. We had a little issue with the governor earlier at the end of the session when he tried to run a deal called the Beehive Bill, which would have put a lid over all these land use authorities and maybe put them in a position where they could not act as quickly. That's why land use authorities work, is because they can move quickly. We pass away, we get out of the process of government interference and overbearing, and we're able to move quickly with what we do. And that's why the PIDs work. The PIDs work, and that's why the land use authorities work. I think as of right now, what we've got here is we maybe have a solution in search of a problem. And I'm not prepared to move on that. I would like to see things remain as they are. Let's move forward with this. If we need changes in the future, let's look at changes in the future. But let's move forward with what we've got right now as quickly as we possibly can.
Thanks, Senator. Let's go to Chair Snow, then we'll go to Mayor Wilson.
Robert, thanks for your comments. They're helpful. I think Senator Stevenson and I are aligned. I think there's some things that it's important that we keep in mind. First, when the state undertook this project, and I'm talking about the entire project, we elected not to become the developers, which was the right decision. We took on a first phase partner, not for the entire 600 acres or 700 acres. Originally, when we started, we thought we had 700 acres and then it's reduced. But for the first phase, we took on a partner. You know, in the law, we talk about having a partner and having fiduciary. and loyalty and trust. We selected them after quite an exhaustive search, quite an exhaustive process. And I have to tell you, I was involved, I've been involved since the beginning, but I was involved in that process. And I have to tell you, I don't know of one thing that they have done up to this point, to this day, that have caused me not to trust them, or what their motives are, or what that their mission is aligned with our mission. I think it's also important to keep in mind that the PID, the PID financing does not come from the state. It comes from private parties out there who make an investment in what they see. And what they see is not just looking at your development plans or what it's going to look like, this structure is going to look like. It takes that into account, but they also look at what the underlying documents are and what the underlying structure is. And why do they look at those issues? Because they want certainty. I'm with the senator in that we shouldn't be here making policy just for us. If it's good policy that those things be instituted on a statewide basis, then let's let the legislature do that. Either in a special session or general, I'm fine with that. But my concern, as some of you have called me, is we need to move this forward. The developers started out, our partners, with an agreement that we all signed saying they have 4 places. They relied on that. I'm not making a legal argument here, Troy and Jordan. They relied on that and they invested their private money into this public project, believing that because we had agreed to the bid financing, that they would control the board. And at the end of the day, once the financing came, they would be reimbursed. And I can't remember what the figure is, Robert. You told me what you all have invested, but it's a significant amount of money in a public project, not their project. The second thing I point out is our consultant, Steve, I'm sorry, help me out, his last name, has made it clear that we have to get something off the ground now. We need a catalyst. And everyone that has looked at this project has said, this is the catalyst we need. And that's why our partners have said, we need this project. It's not like they need an event center that's where they're going to make their money from. It's the catalyst that makes the money on everything else. We need to move this forward. And we need to do it now. One of the meetings, I've had a number of meetings with the developers and with Mike in attendance and some of you in attendance. One of the things that they said really struck home with me, having worked in real estate, not myself, but representing, they said, all the oxygen, development oxygen, is being sucked out of the room and going where? Where? LH Miller, Larry H. Miller, their project, what do they call it? The district project. And Ryan Smith, and the state has been over, you forgive me if I'm misstating this, my friends in the legislature, but the legislature has bent over backwards to support those projects, bent over backwards, essentially giving them almost whatever they want. And I apologize, Mayor, if I'm going too far there. And yes, I think it is good for the downtown. And Mayor, I believe that. Those things are good for the preservation of the downtown. But you know what? This project is important to the state long after those athletic events and those teams will be long gone. My feeling is if Robert came here today and said, this makes no difference to moving this project forward, I would vote for it. But we need to move this forward. And the other thing Robert has intimated is, I don't know whether you know this, but we're in a very volatile economic situation in this country right now. And I'm not going to say who is or isn't to blame for that. But what you see in the market today, any stability, absolutely could change 2 weeks from now. My position is, let's strike while the iron's hot. No offense intended. And in fact, I have the greatest respect for Representative Tusher, and I understand why we're saying this. But we've already walked down this road. The train left the station on the 4 appointments. And now we're saying to them after they've invested over $1 million to say, well, we're going to change, potentially, we're going to change that structure and put you at risk. And so anyway, I've said enough. My main concern is, as I've said, it's time to go forward. And if this is a policy change that needs to be affected, then let's do it statewide. Let's not just pick this PID project, our project, and handcuff our partners in moving this forward. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Mayor Wilson, if you'll let Senator
Oh,
Stevenson
sure.
say one thing.
Yeah, of course.
Just one really quick comment. You know, we talk about legislation. There are, if we end up with a special session, there's a lot of discussion to that. I really doubt that this would meet the muster of special session. Well, I believe what we would have is a bill that would be moved forward in the next generals. These things for a long. Yeah, well, I'm turning myself off up here, so well, we seem to come up with items really need to be important or very pertinent to move forward in a special session. I don't think this meets that muster, so.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson.
Okay, a couple of comments. First of all, I'm so thrilled to be on this board, but as I am often asking each body to step up and support the county in some way, now I feel like I'm in a pickle, but happy to represent 1.2 million constituents. And I love all the great projects that are moving, and I really want us, each is unique, right? We could talk later about why I think that the downtown project really was a home run and will be. I'm mixing analogies now, sports analogies, I know. Given we have hockey and basketball kept remaining in downtown, which is great. I felt really good about that one. We'll talk later. But on this particular opportunity, because I really believe that it is, I have appreciated being here, bringing what I have had an experience to, work with to date as it relates to various other developments and bring any level of understanding I have to the table. This one is incredibly unique, and I appreciate the work that has been done to date by the legislature in several sessions, authorizing this board to do the heavy lift. I also appreciate the fast pace and the commitment of the executive director, who has moved rather quickly. I mean, we have several important steps today. Hopefully they won't take as much time as this one is because we have to move. I've also had a chance, a very limited amount of engagement directly with the development team, but I share confidence in their work. I will say that the concept of a PID is complex. I'm learning each is unique. And I would say when it comes to the decision before us today, what I really had to do is dig deep last night, having a conversation with the sponsor and going through documents. And I really feel that this particular we have a lot of protections, and the protections are outlined even this morning reading a summary document that I didn't get to last night. It actually is a summary document from our actions on March 18th. We gave approval to move forward. There are terms listed, and there's sort of a governance, sort of method set up through the actions that day, including authorizing the PID to maintain infrastructure, maintenance and programming for phase 1 and the event sub campus. It goes on to talk about the capital pledge agreement, but then it specifically says we have, through this action, prohibited the PID from committing pledge funds to any new projects without our approval. It specifies that failure to deliver the event will result in termination of the agreement. And then it refers to the development agreement, which dictates the requirements of the development, requires compliance with the sub-campus design guidelines, requires compliance with subplan. In other words, there's a lot of meat to what we have already convened around and passed. That is what I feel gives us the protections that perhaps, and I'd like to hear a response at some point from the sponsor. I'm sure he will want to provide some comments, but I believe that the governance documents that are in place provide the protections that we need. And I fear that this delicate balance of what really I think the legislature intended, this body intended, and the governor intended is this idea that we do things differently. There's reasons the state is not running this, thus this unique structure as it relates to the PID and the development agreement and the selection of the development team. So that line to me is different than a traditional state decision. It would be different than a traditional county decision. And the reason we meet time and time again is to get the documents right. I fear, and I mentioned this to the sponsor, the idea of not having a limitation to the removal. If the proposal before us included that we could remove with cause, I would feel very differently. And the cause, it could even go beyond maybe there's another step that isn't embedded in the documents that we're agreeing to and moving forward with. But I think we would have to define that cause. So I don't like the idea of the board because we're all here for different reasons. We all have some level, many of us, of involvement with a constituency. And that means that our political environments have to enter in. And I think what the free market, to the extent this is a free market, I guess not, that's probably the wrong term, but the developers and the infrastructure with capital investment and, they need to play in a traditional development world, has to have them with some freedom, I think, behind the idea of political influence at some point. So we bring our political best minds to this table, we create documents, we move on, we say, this is what you must comply with. The idea that we could, for any reason, remove PID board members, I think is a step too far. Again, if there were some limitations written in, I might feel differently. And for that reason, I'd like to continue with conversation today, but I think I'm leaning to opposing the amendment, which would allow us to remove board members or to PID board members with or without cause.
Mayor Walker.
Okay, so we are where we are at because of our actions as a board right now. I mean, they're ready to issue bonds maybe tomorrow or Friday. What's that? Go to market. We have put ourselves right in this situation ourselves. And I thought we had a pretty robust discussion on the PIDs, and I would love to tell you that I'm a PID expert, but I'm not. I had one other question, and is this: if we don't approve this resolution and y'all move forward, you understand that the law could get changed and it could say the Palmsville board can remove a member. What do you say to that, Robert?
We can't, I mean, the state's going to do what the state's going to do in terms of law, state law. And so I would say that whatever state law gets passed, we would do our best to give input as to the consequences, intended or unintended consequences of a law that gets passed would be. But certainly if a law is passed, we're all going to comply with the law. But the market is going to react in the way that the market will react, intended or unintended, to such law.
Okay, so I appreciate Representative Tusher's the concept of trying to have another hook for this board. And I've listened to it and I've honestly wrestled with it because I get the concept of it. And I think it's simplistically, it's a sound concept in that you can say, yeah, we want to have this one more hook. But this is a nuanced project in the sense of it's different than anything we've ever done. We did take the position, and I've always had it, that we don't want to be the developers as the Palmsville board. that we want the private sector to have the autonomy to move and develop and get this project going. That was a conscious decision that we made, that I made. I also was involved in the entire process. And I agree with you when I think back on it. I can't think of anything they've done that I think makes me not trust what their intention is. Obviously, if they make a grundle of money, so does the state. We're symbiotic in that regard. I want you to make a grundle of money. I want you to make it the finest project in the world, because that's better. Your argument that it inures, all the benefits do inure to the state, and it takes me to something that Lowry put in the DDA way back in the DDA days, which was a slick argument or a slick provision. And that is, at the end of this, the state can buy this venue for $100.
It's in the lease agreement.
Yeah, $100. So at the end of the day, we might just want to own a venue, and so we could. I think that the way we've moved forward is the way we intended to move forward, all this water under the bridge. Now, if Representative Fisher, if something comes up and it becomes clearly untenable, obviously the law can change and there's really not much we can do about it. I want to continue forward with what we've done, in the sense of, I think we're protected. I think that we have a partnership opportunity, and I don't think they can just go haywire on us. And if they do, you could call a special session, or you could, and maybe that's a greater discussion, whether this needs to be the way you say, needs to come from the legislature as a body saying, this is what we think, we really want this hook. But I feel like I'm persuaded back to the fact that we're in this deal, and it's the deal we got in on purpose. We didn't do it by mistake, and we were deliberate, and we have had lots of opportunity to fix this or look at it. And I guess, I feel like I'm on the appeals court in some ways. I'm trying to hear both sides of it, but I guess I want to just, the way I feel about it is, I think I'm status quo. I want to see this thing launch. And if something comes up, we can fix it at a different level.
Thank you. Senator Stevenson.
I was just going to say, the state tried to develop that property. We built a prison and we had to tear it down.
The ROI was not that great on it.
All right. Any further discussion from the committee? All right, I'm going to take a second here to respond. If you'll give me a little bit of time, because there's been a lot of comments that have gone on here. And I appreciate the robust discussion that we've had here. Wish we did have more time to be able to get this done right. And quite honestly, I think this board got this wrong last year. This should have been resolved last year, and it's unfortunate that we're in the situation that we are in. That being said, let me talk about a couple things. First, I've heard a couple comments around, we don't want to be the developers. Nothing in this proposal, or I think in anything that we're proposing here today, would change the relationship between the progress and direction that the board has set, that we want to have clear partners and we want to have developers that are doing the hard work of developing. This doesn't change any of that. In fact, the actual development work isn't done at the PID board decision-making anyway. Again, that's just a sub board that's then approving the appropriations of the money that then would go to a developer to actually do the developing work. And so no one's trying to change anything around the relationship of this board and whether or not or how we're involved in the development. What it does do with these PIDs boards is the PIDs have extreme latitude in the way that these funds are appropriated. The broadness of the scope essentially to build an event center and infrastructure is infinitely broad as long as it's within that scope. And so the idea that, well, we have protections within these agreements is just not true. I think we have strong protections around fraud or being used for other types of projects, but within that scope of an event center and infrastructure for phase one development, the PID board has ultimate latitude to decide the priority of those projects, how much money is going to go to each of those projects, as long as they fit within the design guidelines that this board has set. And that's really where the concern comes from. And this idea that, what we're proposing here is theory-based. I mean, how many different projects can you think of where there have been disagreements between owners of property and developers, or the state and developers? I mean, it's not outside the realm of theory to think through different times where we may think that moving in one direction is better than a different direction, and developers may think something different. And what we've done here is we have delegated all of those decisions down to the PID board in terms of what the priority of those projects is going to be. The downsides that I hear are really twofold. One, time, and the other one being about private dollars that have been invested. Talking about time, I think Mayor Walker kind of pushed on this, and Mayor Wilson around, well, what does this change? Why does this change any of the timing? Couldn't you go out and solicit bonds tomorrow, regardless of whether or not this passed? And the answer is yes. This has nothing to do, this doesn't delay the project in any respect at all. Secondly, in dealing with time, I understand the urgency of the project and the expediency of the project, but we should never let, especially when dealing with public dollars and a public project, expediency to get in the way of what the right policy should be. The right policy here is to ensure that the board has the right checks and balances. It would be a lot more expedient to just make Robert today the executive director of this board, fire all of us, and just give him all the money and go and do it. He would be able to do it a lot quicker. But there are reasons why we have checks and balances in place, in particular when we're dealing with public monies and public resources. And so, though this resolution does not change the timing in any respect of what we're talking about today, the expediency for expediency's sake is simply not a good path to pursue. In terms of the private dollars that have already been invested, I would say, one, that investment has already happened, right? And it is certainly the expectation of this board that those dollars will be reimbursed by the bond money that goes forward. And there's certainly other ways that we could mitigate against that. And in Palms List, signing some sort of LOI with the developers to ensure that they get that reimbursement. I think the private dollar argument is really a red herring, and is just a smokescreen to put up to try to cause confusion around what the ultimate issue is here. A couple of things I want to say around kind of the legislature and the legislature's role in this and setting up the legislation that currently exists. Let me first just say, in terms of the comments around the priority of the legislature of the projects that are being considered across the state, I think I can say emphatically that this project is the most important project that we're taking on as a state. And we see that in a couple different ways. This is the only project that we're talking about where we're dealing with state property, where the state gets actual direct dollars, return on investment dollars, rather than just indirect dollars from tax and jobs and other things. It's our own project with our own money that the state is highly invested in. And then aside from any of these other projects, whether it has to be with the power district or the downtown revitalization project or any other project across the state, this is the only project where the state has appropriated a significant amount of funds, direct funds, to go to the project, whether it's for the backbone infrastructure, whether it's for the convergence hall that's going to be built in the project. Those are real dollars, not a portion of tax dollars or some sort of TIF that's in place that eventually on the back end would have come to the state. But these are actually hard dollars that have already been collected, that have been pledged to this project. I think it goes to the priority and importance of this project that we have in the state. And that can't be overstated in any of the comments that we have. I just want to make sure that it's clear to the public how important this project is to the state. In terms of, looking at legislation and how it should affect other types of projects or authority boards, I think it's important to note that this is, as far as I understand, of any PID board that has been created, this would be the only PID board that is developer run. Every other PID board across the state, whether it's MIDA, whether it's the inland port, actually has a majority of the board members of that authority that sit on that PID board. And so this is the first time the legislature has really even had to deal with this idea. It wasn't like the idea was, let's let them decide how these PID boards are supposed to be created. But in every other case, the other authorities have wisely ensured that they have that sense of oversight and control over the PID boards. We have delegated that responsibility, and I think in a very poor way. Lastly, just actually, let me say one other thing. I think it's also important to note here that we're not just talking about PID 1, but this applies to PIDs 1 through 9. PIDs 1 through 9 have the exact same board structure and the exact same appointments. And so regardless of where we go with PID 1, this will continue to have this problem in every other PID board that we're going to consider. And those PID boards are already set up and are already staffed. Lastly, just on the trust issue, I mentioned it at the very beginning, and I think it's important to re-emphasize that I have the utmost trust in our development partners, that we're not running this because I'm not running this because I'm concerned about that level of trust. If anything, it's this conversation that has caused me to doubt some of the trust that we have in the partnership. Because quite honestly, I think if these PID boards and TPP is doing what they're supposed to, then this would never be enacted. We would never need to come back and have to look at replacing any member of the board. And so it puts in a little bit of uncertainty of, if this is really a fail-safe that we have in place, then why is TPP so concerned about having that option in the future? That being said, I think it's important to note that we are in this relationship because we believe that our development partners can do the work. We want them to do the good work. And ultimately, this resolution is just a tool to ensure that we're doing the proper thing that we have in the oath that we've taken as a board, to ensure that when we look at public dollars, and we're not talking about a minority of public dollars here, the majority of the money that is going back to pay these bonds are coming from public dollars, either from the pledge of sales tax or from the property tax that would be consumed on this property. It's not coming back from the revenue from the event venue or parking, or even some assessment that's being made that you would have in a typical PID. But the majority of the money is coming from the public. That gives an extra responsibility for us to ensure that the right guardrails are in place. They aren't, which is why I'm bringing forward this resolution. And so with that, I would urge the support of this board for the resolution, and make a motion that we, Mayor Walker, go ahead.
Okay, so the PID board members serve a term right now that were appointed by us. When their term expires, do we have a chance to appoint somebody else?
Goes back to the leasees. So the majority of the
So
leasees
it
get to
always
vote.
stays those who have the lease.
I've got a question now based on a point you made. It might be a comment. I've perceived, and maybe the question is, tell me if I'm not perceiving this correctly from your perspective. I perceive that this is our first, and that we're setting agreements and terms, and it's new territory, relatively new executive director. That this is new to us all. That PID 2, lessons learned. I have perceived that when we go through this next iteration for PID 2, that we will fine tune. So I'm curious for you to say that we couldn't at a later stage, like this is binding for all 9. Because I think on a number of matters, lessons learned, right? And you've made a point, Representative, that there are not enough parameters around design and all of that. It reads that there are some. So PID 2, we could tighten up. Like, I feel at this late hour, we got to let them go, but I will have my antenna up to say this work that's did, and I will be open to more modifications, more controls, more guardrails for PIDs 2 through 9. I mean, that seems logical. So I guess I would ask you, why do you perceive that I'm wrong, that we couldn't pull back.
Yeah, so PIDs 1 through 9 are created, and we've already made the appointments for the boards.
But,
And
but
the
the
board-
terms are not set.
Well, we haven't pledged anything to those PIDs. And those PIDs could go out and do whatever they want. They could go out to a bond market and try to pitch some sort of assessment and not have to come back to Palmsla necessarily for anything. Those exist. The PID boards are there. The 4 members of TPP sit on those PID boards, and Michael sits as well. And so certainly we could try to pass another resolution that would apply to other PID boards in the future, but then it would still require those PID boards to approve them. We have already made the decision to set up the 9, and we've already made the appointments to those PID boards. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but I see that, and this might be a legal question. I see that, I mean, this one's very specific to the management of the entertainment venue. That's the difference between the discussions we're having, and I guess it's beyond discussions, but the SEG related, right? That's more very tied to only the transaction specific to the issuance of the bonds and the PID creating some infrastructure around that. I have perceived that future PIDs will have a life of their own, right? They're not going to, and that we will have controls over the intent, the purpose, that
I think those PIDs exist and they can go out and do that.
And
We
so
could
this
try to
one is
amend them.
unique in that it does include the entertainment venue operations.
It is unique in that, but in addition to the entertainment venue, it has all of the infrastructure in phase 1.
I have one more question.
Could I just make a quick statement, April? I apologize because it relates to, I think, what the mayor said, and that is for subsequent bids, if there are pledges requested of taxes as being done in this case, we would have at that point the control as a condition over that pledge if we felt like it was necessary to impose new conditions.
And that's what I said, you know, if we were going to pledge something different, but otherwise those PIDs exist and they can go out and do whatever they want to do.
But couldn't we let this one run with their concerns and the uncertainty in the market? And if it gets haywire, this comes back again? I mean, I think they know what your intent is. They know what you're trying to do. They know that if it gets squirrely, you had a bill file, you've got us listening and at least thinking through the guardrail concept. I'm just thinking out loud. If we let this run and we hopefully get it to move, if they get squirrely, can't we just come back and do this again? Or better yet, you and Jerry fix it at the legislature if it gets squirrely? I guess, what's the urgency is my real question.
Today, we are pledging hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money. That's the leverage that we have today to get them to approve this agreement. If once we have pledged that money, that PID board now can go out and appropriate it, you know, based on the bonds that they receive. That's the urgency. And that's why since December, we've been having these conversations in trying to figure out how to solve this problem or this concern that I've had before we make that pledge.
So my question is, the pledge is just for PID 1 and PID 1's just the 4.74 acres with an event venue planned. And our PIDs, and then next question is, are PIDs 1 through 9 just phase 1? We haven't done anything that will govern or carry into other phases, correct?
Michael, did you want to address that? I don't know if your mic's on. Is it on?
There you go. PID 1 includes the promenade area and that 4.7 acres. So the infrastructure in the promenade, the roads, and the event center, and maybe and some ground surface parking.
Okay,
That's what
so
it
one
includes.
follow-up question then. Phase 1 plus the event center is about 104,
Correct.
105 acres. Do 9 PIDs cover all of that?
Yes,
And this PID 1 is approximately how big? The promenade and
it's
the,
like 12, no, it's bigger than that, maybe 16 acres-ish.
Okay, maybe like 10 or 15%. Okay, so today, after this discussion item, we're being asked to pledge the equivalent tax revenues and tax dollars for just PID one, those
Correct.
16 acres.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
Any further discussion from the board? That being said, then I'll make a motion that we approve the resolution as we've been discussing, PID governing document draft amendment. Is that what it's called? Resolution 2025-04, Public Infrastructure District governing documents. Is there a second? If there's no second, then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is item number 8, consideration of entertainment venue disposition and development agreement. I'll turn some time over to Director Ombre to review the entertainment venue DDA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This document was one in your packet. It's fairly simple. Were there any questions regarding the DDA for the sub-campus entertainment venue?
Back to the board. Any questions? Discussion? Does that conclude your presentation there?
I can give you a real high-level update on what it includes. It dedicates the requirements of the development of the event center and parking area. It requires compliance with the sub-campus design guidelines. It requires compliance with the sub-campus use restrictions, which mirror the phase 1 use restrictions.
Okay. Any board action or questions, discussion? Mayor Walker?
Motion to approve if we're ready for that.
Okay, the motion is to approve the entertainment venue ground lease. Let me.
I like that $100.
You're looking for the resolution.
Well, we have a proposed resolution, but I think we could just take it on a motion. JC, do you want to come forward and explain the process on this?
Do you want to make that your motion?
Yeah, so I've got the motion here. So Mayor Walker, if you're okay, if I could just restate your motion based on what JC has proposed. And that would be, your motion would be to approve resolution, excuse me, you approve the entertainment venue disposition and development agreement and delegate the authority to finalize any details and make technical corrections consistent with the approved draft to the co-chairs and executive director, Michael Ambre, and to direct the executive director, Ambre, to execute the document. Is that your motion?
That is in fact my motion.
Well said, Mayor.
Thank you.
All right. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second from Mayor Wilson. Any discussion of that motion? I'll just mention that, consistent with the comments that I've made earlier, I can't in good conscience vote for this without having the removal term that we have. So I will be voting against this. All right, we'll take that motion. I'll restate the motion again. The motion is to approve the entertainment venue disposition and development agreement and delegate the authority to finalize any details and make technical corrections consistent with the approved draft of co-chairs and executive director Ambre, and direct Director Ambre to execute the document. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Nay. I'll rule that passes with Representative Tusher voting against. We'll move to the 10th item on our agenda, which is consideration of the capital pledge agreement. I'll go back to Director Ambre to review that agreement.
I believe there's an item number 9 before that.
That was 9, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, 9 is the ground.
Oh.
lease. Yeah.
Okay, did we already vote on
Sorry.
number 8?
You're right. That was number 8. Sorry, we'll move to number 9, consideration of the entertainment venue ground lease.
So again, this was issued a week ago in a packet. The ground lease, high level again, it documents the terms for the lease of the 4.74 acres designated for the event subcampus for the initial term of 40 years. The agreement contains an option to extend the term by 10 years up to 6 times, assuming no defaults exist. Dedicates the permitted uses for the leased property as operating an event center, parking area, and retail uses within the parking area, together with any related facilities, amenities, ancillary uses, and any other lawful purpose permitted under applicable laws, ordinances, or zoning regulations. It provides for termination of the ground lease by agreement of the parties or an uncured default event. Provides for an option for Palmsla to purchase the event center and parking area at the end of the initial 40-year term and at the expiration of any subsequent extensions.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or questions from the committee? All right, any motion?
I have a motion, Mr. Chair.
Yep, Chair Snow.
My motion would be that the board approve the lease as prepared and explained by our director, and with the language contained that you read previously, Representative Tusher, about authorizing the director to sign with input from the co-chairs. If I could also say, I'm glad Mike, our director, reminded everyone of the lease of the option in favor of the state of Utah after the initial term, which gives the state the opportunity at that point to turn this into a sale of the project entirely, or to operate it, or to assign that lease for consideration or otherwise. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Snow. Second from Mayor Walker. Any discussion on that motion? April, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question on the Exhibit C on the rents. We did the base rent and then we did a 2% annually as opposed to like a cost of living adjustment. Does that go through the 60 years of potential extensions too?
No, I don't believe so. At the extension time, yeah.
Okay, so that just goes their initial base term of 40 years and each of the extensions, it's the rent amount is renegotiable. Okay.
Any additional comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll place the motion. The motion is to approve the entertainment venue ground lease and delegate the authority to finalize any details and make technical corrections consistent with the approved draft to the co-chairs and Executive Director Ambray, and to direct Executive Director Ambray to execute the document. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. I'll roll that passes with Chair Tusher voting against it. We'll move to the 10th item on the agenda, which is the capital pledge agreement motion. Again, Director Ambray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This document will pledge Palmsla revenues to the bond trustee for the PID for the specific purpose of making bond payments for authorized infrastructure projects. It dedicates 50% of state sales tax dedicated to Palmsla that is generated within the PID area to the PID for allowable district costs. It dedicates 90% of the privilege tax generated within the PID and distributed to Palmsla to the PID for allowable district costs for 10 years. And then after 10 years, it dedicates 75% of the privilege tax generated for the remaining 30-year period. Defines allowable district costs as approved administrative expenses and district obligations, specifically to the public-owned infrastructure and improvements as identified and allowed within the Palmsla Act.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion from the board or motion? Mayor Walker.
I move that we approve the pledge agreement as presented.
All right, so the motion is to approve the pledge agreement as presented, I assume with the additional language around that-
Yes,
that we've
the
had.
ability to negotiate the final.
All right, is there a second? Second from Mayor Wilson. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll place the motion. The motion is to approve the to approve the capital pledge agreement, and delegate the authority to finalize any details and make technical corrections consistent with the approved draft to the co-chairs and Executive Director Ambray, and to direct Executive Director Ambray to execute the document. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Nay. Roll that passage with Tusher opposed. So move to resolution 2025-05, approval of the Palmsla Draper City interlocal agreement. And we heard a little bit about this from Director Ambray earlier, but we have been working, it says here for 6 months, but really a lot longer than that in trying to work with Draper and their legal counsels and ours to draft an interlocal agreement between the Land Authority and Draper City. This agreement establishes the public services, the phase consistent with the progress of the project. It also clarifies impact fees, dedicated public improvements, the basis of design, among many other provisions. So we're really grateful. I know this has been something that has taken a fair amount of time and energy to get to that. We're grateful for Draper. We're grateful for the great work from our Executive Director and others. But let me turn some time over to you, Michael, to review this and give any other additional comments you'd like.
You know, I would like to defer to the mayor, Mayor Walker. We've been in 2 meetings a week for what seems like more than 6 months to try to hash this thing out. And I appreciate the mayor and I appreciate his staff, because, you know, this is a very big deal to get passed and get right. So Mayor, if you want to.
Thank you. I also appreciate the efforts that we've spent working together on it. I do want to say, you know, just for the record, that this is a unique situation. Typically in a development, you know, we would have our city standards and codes would apply direct. There wouldn't be any question. We would just apply what we typically do in Draper. This is so unique and different, and we want it to be that we have some different, you know, different standards. Not that they're not safe or they're not right, but they're different. And so it's taken time for, you know, my city staff and engineers to be able to understand and get to a place where we feel like we're all on the same page. Our goal all along as a city person has been good infrastructure built the way we want it, that we can accept without any hesitation and move forward and maintain it. Because as you all know, once we take a road or we take a water system or a storm drain system, then it's our obligation to run it, maintain it, keep it going. So that's been the context of it. I will say that we've come all the way around the bend, I think. We've had our moments when we've been at loggerheads, to say the least. We've also had our moments where I think we're kind of getting on the same page. But I want to say, in my capacity as mayor, I cannot tell you I approve this because my council members are the ones who get the ultimate approval. But as a member of Palmsla and having been in negotiations, I think this agreement is in a place that works and is good, and we've gotten there. So I am comfortable with it. And I appreciate all the hard work and effort. And again, it's so unique and different that it's been quite an interesting experience to work through, but one that we've worked through. So that's my statement.
Thank you, Mayor Walker. Yeah, let's go to Senator Stevenson.
Yeah, this is a little off track, but would, this is approved, it's a public document, we'd be able to, we're going to have to enter into something with the inland port process with Salt Lake City. Very similar, only we've, back in the original legislation, I think we've taken probably more tax increment than we should. And there's going to have to be a balancing done here. And would we be able to use this as sort of maybe a situation where we could look at it? And I know that it wouldn't fit totally, but it may fit well as far as some of the infrastructure, or not the infrastructure, but the services that the city, Salt Lake City, has to provide to that area, that we would be looking at. We need to compensate them back, is what I'm saying. I don't think that's in the original legislation. As that ground develops, we're going to have to come up with something, and I'd like to take a look at this if we could. Maybe it would help us in that process.
That's above my pay grade with respect to, I don't know much about the other. I mean, this document really is about the standards on infrastructure, not necessarily about the revenue coming back to us for services. That's a different agreement, Sender. So this one is about how we determine, yeah, this road, that road base, that curb and gutter, that trail, that everything fits the, you know, the standards that we can agree to. So I think that you definitely could apply because with, you know, to the uniqueness, but with respect to the services and the revenue coming back to cover my police, fire, public works, all that, we haven't hammered that one out yet.
I think the port is just going to have a roadmap, if we could, to help with how we compensate Salt Lake City for their infrastructure.
We've certainly spent a lot of time
Infrastructure
and
and-
legal money on figuring this one out. So
Thank you.
it's pretty good.
We'll
document.
corner Mike and see if we can have him help. He's already done that, I guess, to some extent.
So yes, you will get the benefit of my attorney's work on this project. You're welcome. And the benefit of Steve's work on this project. I don't want to lose that.
Thank you, Senator. Any additional discussion? Go ahead, April.
I have one quick question. The 27 acres for community park, do we foresee that that's in phase 1 through 4 or outside of the phases?
It's outside of the phases. So it's towards the west end near the tracks.
Okay.
It's been part of the framework plan from the beginning.
Okay, what
Yeah.
we had already kind of
Yeah,
done
as
and
the
as green
community park.
space.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Question
April.
for the mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, Mayor.
Just, I'm curious how much involvement your council has had. Do you feel like we're on the right track and you're prepared to?
I mean, they've been informed by myself and our council and our city manager all the way along the way. And the council gave the parameters of, you know, this is how we need it to fit. So I'm confident they're gonna.
Great.
It's in a place that we have a bunch of safeguards and some Q&A inspections that are
Right.
good, that I'm very happy with. I think council.
Mayor Wilson, I did meet individually with the council members and give them kind of an overview on what we were trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Mayor.
I
Any
would never
additional?
speak for my council members, but I think they're.
Me neither.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other discussion here. Before we take the motion, let me just read the resolution, the therefore portion of the resolution, just so it's clear. It says now therefore the board of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority by the authority vested to it by the laws of the state of Utah does hereby resolve the following. 1, the Land Authority Board approves an interlocal agreement between the Land Authority and Draper City. 2, the Land Authority Board delegates the authority to finalize details and make technical corrections consistent with the approved draft to board co-chairs Jordan Tusher and V. Lowry Snow. 3, the Land Authority Board delegates authority to Executive Director Michael Ambrey to execute the amendments to the Phase 1 DDA and authorize above with approval from the co-chairs. And then I'll also note that this was also publicly posted in accordance with state law and the needs that we have there. So with that, is there a motion to approve this resolution?
Want to or not?
I'd like to make a comment and a motion.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So much has been said about the process leading up to this event today. I've been privileged to be a part of some of those early meetings, Mayor and Mike. And I have to tell you, I attended 2 at the city offices in Draper with the attorneys on both sides. And I think one, maybe the first one, Steve, without you, it was not a good meeting. It was tough. There were, I began to think and wonder whether we'd ever get to this point. Second meeting was better, but there was a turning point in the second meeting. And a lot of our problems related to trying to get city standards to mesh with what we wanted to do at the point. Because ultimately the city would be taking over this infrastructure and we were looking for some concessions. And it looked like we were at an impasse. And our director spoke up and he had an idea. He said, wait a minute, when I was overseeing the prison, we utilized a consultant. And that was a huge breakthrough, Mike. And so POMSA will pay for that consultant. All of this is in the agreement. Will be an employee on behalf of the city, will represent the city. But I just want to give credit to those that have worked on this and hammered it out, because it was, and I think Steve would agree, a heavy duty process, but what a great thing. So with that, I make a motion that we move forward on the resolution as you stated, co-chair Tusher.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Second from Mayor Wilson, the motion, or any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, I'll restate it. The motion is to approve resolution 2025-05 to approve the interlocal agreement with Draper City. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Rule that passes unanimously. All right. I know we're over our time. Can we?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna suggest. I was gonna suggest, I hate to do this to you, Steve, but maybe we could push this to the next board meeting. 'cause
This
is
doesn't
not
look
pressing.
simple.
Yeah. This might take a minute or two. That's why I'm suggesting that. yeah.
All right. So I appreciate that. So
It's worse on an iPad trying to follow.
This is Medicaid reform.
we'll entertain this very complicated chart next board meeting. Our next board meeting is, we have a board meeting scheduled for July. I think there's still some question of whether or not we're going to go ahead and have that meeting or not, but we'll let the board know. I'd say plan on that board meeting for now. And that is scheduled currently for July 9th at 10 a.m. That being July 9th at 10 a.m. That being said, I appreciate everyone who's contributed today and participating in the board meeting. We have had some great discussions. I'll take a final motion. Senator Stevenson. A motion is to adjourn. That's non-debatable. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you.